Good morning, folks. Welcome to the PT on Ice Daily Show, brought to you by the Institute of Clinical Excellence. My name is Dr. Dustin Jones, one of the lead faculty within the older adult division, and today we're going to talk about nocebos and osteoporotic fractures. We're going to talk about some of the general advice that is given to folks with osteoporosis to avoid bending, twisting, lifting, and is that helpful or is it harmful? We're going to dive into this. This is based on an ICE student question that I really appreciate and want to take the time to discuss this because I think this is something that we all need to think about as we are working with folks that may have osteoporosis that are concerned of a fracture. All right, so Lisa Moore, what's up, Lisa? I appreciate you asking this question. I'm going to read this verbatim. She said, first, I want to thank the MOA team for the osteoporosis workshop. So I'll link to this in the comments, but we gave a run your own osteoporosis workshop resource recording slides that you can use. So Lisa watched this and she said, what I did not see in the slides is what caution your clients, what you caution your osteoporotic clients to not do. What do you tell them to avoid? There's a lot of fear with the diagnosis and a lot of fear-based dialogue and teaching on social media and in physician offices. I struggle to know what is true. Old research associates flexion-based exercise like sit-ups with increased fractures compared to extension bias exercises. Since then, it has not been repeated because of risk. So everyone out in social media land is afraid to flex their spine, even though we all do it every day. The alleged harm is microfractures over time that degrade the vertebral bodies. I've not found the studies that clarify this, but this is a lingo shared in osteoporosis groups. The other common statement is twisting causing fractures. I worry about severely restricting their movement because they fear fractures and the downstream effects of that. How do you guide your clients with these questions on what movements to avoid? All right. So that's the main point. How do you guide your clients with these questions on what movements to avoid? And so at Stronger Life, and then at this point of my career, working with lots of individuals that have osteoporosis, a lot of folks that have a lot of fear on board about osteoporotic fractures, I intentionally tell them what they need to do versus what they need to avoid. I tell them what they need to do. I empower them with action-based advice of what they can do to tackle this diagnosis, to get some control back in their life on what they can do within their own will and their own volition to change their situation, as opposed to focusing and leading with what they need to avoid. I believe, and I think many of you all you've experienced this as well as working with folks, is that many times when they receive this diagnosis, and it's not just osteoporosis, right? It could be congestive heart failure. It could be a lumbar fusion surgery, right? Where we lead with the precautions. We lead with avoid the bending, lifting, twisting. Avoid lifting more than 10 pounds, for example, of some general precautions that are given to, lots of different surgeries. When we lead with what to avoid and these precautions, we have created this fear-based scenario that has really allowed a lot of deconditioning, a lot of fear-based thinking, a lot of negative perceptions of their body's ability to do hard things. We've created this environment for those negative things to really thrive and grow and impact these people's lives. So I'm at the point now where I will intentionally avoid giving those precautions on the front end. What do I lead with? I lead with an empowering message focused on what they can do versus what they need to avoid. What we're really doing here is when we are providing these precautions up front, it's very easy to create kind of this nocebo effect. If you haven't heard that term before, nocebo, if we're to read the definition, it's a harmless substance or treatment that may cause harmful side effects or worsening of symptoms because the patient thinks or believes they may occur or expects them to occur. And so we can create kind of this negative language around this diagnosis. And it's not just osteoporosis, like I mentioned before, but a lot of people can really focus on kind of that negative aspect. They can really focus on some of those harmful words, and there could ultimately be a net negative as a result. So like in this scenario, what can easily happen is when I'm really focused on giving advice to potentially avoid that future fracture. So I'm saying do not bend, do not twist, do not lift relatively heavy things. that the fear kind of increases that dictates what they choose to do, what they choose not to do. A lot of times physical activity levels start to drop, deconditioning starts to set in, and we look at what their life looks like, maybe not weeks or months after, but when you stretch it out years, decades, it's a net negative in terms of what has happened. We could potentially see a nocebo effect just from words that were spoken. And I've had many folks that they would rather have an increased risk of having a spinal fracture versus all the downstream effects of deconditioning, of all the fear-based choices that they've made when you stretch it out over decades, that it may be a net negative for this. And so what I have really appreciated over the past, I would say, few years, we're starting to see a shift of when we give these precautions, of when we tell people to avoid things. In 2022, there's a UK consensus statement on exercise and osteoporosis, and then Canada followed that up in 2023. And what was really cool to see about these consensus statements is they did not start with what to avoid. They started with, you needed to do higher intensity resistance training. We need to do impact-based training. We need to have progressive resistance training that allows people the time and the space and the stimulus to adapt so their bones and muscles get stronger. Let's start there. That is where they started. And then at the end, they said, oh, and if you want to avoid you're increasing your risk of a fracture, you want to avoid, flexing or bending at the spine, and we want to avoid twisting. Just the reorientation of those recommendations says everything. Here's what you can do. Here's what you can focus on. Oh, and you can avoid these things, right? That messaging right there is going to be so more empowering. We're going to prevent probably that nocebo effect where we may have a net negative result when we're trying to help these individuals, right? So that has been a lovely shift. And I think we need to bring that into the clinic. We need to bring that into the gym. We need to kind of park the precautions, right? And equip people of ways that they can actually improve their situation. So the way that I like to think about this when we're interacting with folks, and why, Lisa, you did not see us put on slides what they need to avoid, is we lead with empowerment and we follow with strategies. We lead with empowerment and we follow with strategies. We're going to give an empowering message that you can do something about this diagnosis. You can make decisions that are going to influence your bone mineral density. It may not reverse osteoporosis. It may not get you from osteoporosis to osteopenia, but we can do things that we know are good for bones that could potentially even slow down decline. And it's going to be a net positive for you to do these things. We lead with empowerment and then we follow with strategies. What are these strategies? It's instead of bending and flexing your spine, let's teach you how to hip hinge, where you can maintain whatever neutral is for you. Mainly use range of motion from the hips to be able to pick something up off the ground. Maybe we talk about how you can set up lifting heavy things off the ground to where we're minimizing the stress on your back. Instead of picking up that heavy case, that case of water bottles, instead of having it, 12 inches in front of your feet, why don't you stand right over top of that thing? That's going to be way easier on your spine, your back. When you have to pick something up out of the trunk, instead of standing way back, get your hips as close as possible to that object that you're picking up. Hey, instead of when you're in that kind of bent over position, you twist to kind of pick something up off the ground. What if we kind of use that hip hinge that we just talked about and just turn your feet so you don't have to twist, and we reduce that risk of a fracture? When we give people specific strategies, we don't make them afraid of life. We give them empowerment. We give them a sense of self-efficacy that I can do the things I want to be able to do. I can go out in the wild and function and thrive and not be so consumed about my spine combusting whenever I bend, twist, or do X, Y, and Z. If we lead with empowerment and follow with strategies, we can have a significant impact in these people's lives and change their perceptions of themselves. And now where I am practicing in the context of fitness, so I'm at Stronger Life, a gym for folks over 55 in Lexington, Kentucky, I'm able to see the impacts of this message stretched out over years. We're about 5 years old at this point. We have members that have osteoporosis that have been with us for over 5 years. And to see what their life looks like, to see the decisions that they make, the hobbies that they pick up, the activities that they do, my goodness, it is just night and day compared to so much of what I experience, particularly in the home health setting, where folks were given this kind of precautionary tale of osteoporosis, and they followed those recommendations. Their physical activity levels plummeted, and what their life looked like as a result was something rather sad to watch, to be quite honest. And so I think we have a huge influence in what that can look like. All right. So lead with empowerment, follow with strategies. We can give a hopeful message to folks with osteoporosis. If you want to see that workshop that Lisa was referring to, I'll give you instructions of how to get that in the comments. You can always DM me on social media, or if you're in the Ice Physio app, just shoot me a message and I'll show you where that is. But it is a recording and unbranded slide deck of a community-based workshop that we gave at Stronger Life to over 50 folks in the room. All right, appreciate you all listening. Want to leave you all with our upcoming MOA courses, our Modern Management of the Older Adult courses. Our online level 1 course is starting October 16th. This is a great foundational course to really get you to embrace that old, not weak mindset and to be able to implement that in your particular setting. And then we build on that in level 2. Our next level 2 is starting October 17th, where we take that old, not weak mindset and some of those foundational principles and apply it to specific situations. And then our live courses are all exercise implementation. How can you take very potent functional activities that we often reserve for young athletes, right, but are very, very applicable in the geriatric setting? How do we take that and apply it across the continuum of care? We have a few double headers coming up September 14th, 15th. This weekend, we're going to be in Casper, Wyoming, and Bend, Oregon. October 12th and 13th, we're going to be in Highland, Michigan, and then Paoli, Pennsylvania. And then the following weekend, October 19th and 20th, we'll be in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Fountain Valley, California. You can find all of those links, courses, resources at ptonice.com. All right, appreciate y'all.